Fly the helicopter and I'll make your son my heir, laughed the millionaire. Without knowing that the black woman was the owner. Fly this helicopter and I'll make your son the heir to my fortune, Richard Blackstone laughed, pointing to the aircraft parked on the terrace of his Manhattan penthouse. His words echoed through the luxurious surroundings as 42-year-old Victoria Williams stood motionless by the infinity pool. The party was in full swing. 50 guests from New York's elite watched the scene with that morbid interest that only the very rich feel when someone is about to be publicly humiliated. Victoria had arrived there as a helicopter mechanic, hired for a routine inspection in the middle of Richard's birthday celebration. She never imagined that this simple maintenance job would turn into the cruelest humiliation she had ever witnessed. Richard, drunk with power and Dom Perignon champagne, had decided to turn a working woman into entertainment for his billionaire friends. Listen up, everyone. Richard clapped his hands, drawing attention. This lady here says she knows about helicopters. Apparently, tinkering with screws qualifies her to fly a $12 million aircraft. Cruel laughter filled the terrace. Victoria held her toolbox tightly. Her 20 years working with aircraft had taught her that some battles are won in silence, watching the enemy reveal all their cards before showing her own. Sarah dear, Richard turned to his wife, do you believe someone like this would know how to distinguish a cyclic from a rudder pedal? More laughter. Sarah Blackstone, eternally young thanks to plastic surgery, whispered something to her friends that made them laugh even louder. My son works at the municipal airport, Victoria replied calmly, ignoring the condescending looks. He dreams of being a commercial pilot one day. Oh, how touching. Richard made an exaggerated grimace. A lovely dream for people like you. But let's be realistic, dear. Commercial piloting requires education, refinement, a certain social class. Victoria felt every word like a blade, but kept her expression serene. What Richard couldn't see was the calculated storm brewing behind those calm eyes. So here's my proposal, Richard spread his arms theatrically. If you can take off in my helicopter and fly once around the building, I guarantee that your son will become the heir to 50% of my fortune. An $800 million deal. The silence that fell over the terrace was absolute. Even the waiters stopped serving drinks. And if I fail? Victoria asked, her voice betraying a genuine curiosity that made Richard smile even more mischievously. If you fail, you sign a document publicly admitting that people of your condition should not aspire beyond their natural limitations. It will be posted on all my social media accounts for my 2 million followers. Victoria looked at the helicopter, then at Richard, then at the 50 faces waiting for her response with almost thirsty anticipation. For a moment, something that looked like vulnerability crossed her face, as if she were weighing the impossible weight of the challenge. But anyone looking more closely would have realized that it wasn't fear that made her hands hesitate over the toolbox. It was the restrained power of someone about to completely rewrite the rules of a game that others didn't even know they were losing. I accept, she said simply, and something in the quietness of her voice made some guests look at each other uncomfortably. Richard clapped his hands, ecstatic. Wonderful. Is anyone filming? I need to document this historic moment for posterity. If this story of prejudice and reversal touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple moment of humiliation would become the catalyst for a revolution that would forever change the lives of everyone on that terrace. Richard was ecstatic. In his 60 years of life, few things gave him as much pleasure as seeing people know their place in the social hierarchy that he considered natural and unquestionable. Now, in front of 50 witnesses from New York's elite, he was about to deliver what he considered a necessary lesson in reality. Sarah dear, record everything, he instructed his wife, who already had her cell phone in position. This will make perfect content for my YouTube channel. 2 million followers will love to see how the real world works. Victoria watched the commotion around her with that same disconcerting calm. The guests formed a semicircle around the area where the helicopter was parked, their champagne glasses sparkling under the terrace lights. Some were already whispering bets about how long it would take her to give up. Before we begin this spectacle, Richard paused dramatically, I think it's only fair that everyone understands exactly what's at stake here. He walked over to Victoria, stopping uncomfortably close. This lady has been repairing helicopters for, how many years now? 20 years, Victoria replied without flinching. 20 years. Richard repeated to the audience. 20 years of turning screws and changing oil. And now she has the audacity to think that qualifies her to fly an aircraft that costs more than most houses. Margaret Whitmore, the mayor's wife, whispered to her friend beside her, "Richard is being too cruel, even by his standards." But her voice was drowned out by the laughter of the other guests. "You know what bothers me the most?" Richard continued, his voice taking on a more venomous tone. "It's this arrogance disguised as humility. This pretense that hard work replaces education, class, birth." He gestured theatrically, as if fixing equipment is the same as commanding it. Victoria clenched her fists for a split second, a movement so subtle that only the most attentive observers noticed. At that moment, uninvited memories surfaced in her mind, her 19-year-old son Michael working 2 jobs to pay for aviation school. The nights he spent studying aerodynamics while she reviewed mechanics manuals at the kitchen table. "My son is going to be a pilot," she said, her voice cutting through the laughter. "And he's going to fly for airlines that people like you will never be able to afford." The silence that followed was tense. Richard blinked, momentarily unsettled by the unexpected confidence of that statement. "How touching," he recovered quickly. "But dreams don't pay for flight school tuition. Do you have any idea what it costs to train a commercial pilot? $300,000. Minimum." He turned to the guests. "Imagine a woman who earns, $40,000 a year, thinking she can afford an elite education for her son." Victoria felt every word like a blow, but something interesting happened. Instead of knocking her down, Richard's cruelty was feeding a flame she had kept under control for a long time. Her eyes fixed on a helicopter, not with nervousness, but with a familiarity that made some spectators wonder why she seemed so comfortable. "James," Richard called to his personal assistant. "Bring the papers I prepared. I want her to sign them before she tries to fly." He smiled maliciously. "It's a simple document. Just confirming that she understands the risks of attempting to fly without proper qualifications, and that she assumes full responsibility for any accident." James brought a clipboard with several documents. Richard leafed through them with obvious satisfaction. "There's also an interesting clause here," he continued. "If you fail when you fail, you agree to record a video statement admitting that people of your background should not aspire beyond their natural abilities. Nothing personal, of course. Just social realism." What Richard couldn't see was that with every cruel word, something changed in the room. Marina Blackwood, billionaire pharmaceutical executive, watched the scene with growing discomfort. Robert Chun, tech mogul, exchanged meaningful glances with his wife. There were limits to what even the elite considered acceptable. "What if I do it?" Victoria asked, her voice maintaining that unsettling calm. "Impossible," Richard laughed. "But hypothetically, if by some miracle you manage to take off and land without killing anyone, I honor my word. Your son becomes heir to $800 million. He paused. "And I'll post a video on all my social media accounts admitting I was wrong." Victoria picked up the pen and signed the documents without hesitation. The movement was so fluid, so devoid of tremor or hesitation, that some guests began to wonder if perhaps they were about to witness something completely different from what they expected. "Excellent," Richard clapped his hands. "Now, before the show begins, anyone want to place bets? How long before she gives up?" 30 seconds after trying to start the engine, shouted Thomas Bradford, owner of a hotel chain. "I say she won't even try to start it," replied Patricia Wells, heiress to a real estate empire. Victoria walked toward the helicopter, and that's when something extraordinary happened. Her steps changed. No longer the careful walk of an intimidated worker, but the confident movements of someone who knew exactly where she was going. She opened the aircraft door and examined the interior with eyes that seemed to know every instrument. For a moment, as she adjusted the pilot seat and tested the pedals, some of the more observant guests noticed something disturbing. She moved around the cabin as if she had done it 1,000 times before. Each new humiliation only fueled something inside her that her oppressors couldn't see, a silent strength nourished by the very injustice they tried to impose, turning their contempt into the exact fuel she needed to rewrite not only her story, but also everyone's understanding of power, privilege, and the dangerous consequences of underestimating someone whose true identity remained hidden beneath layers of prejudice and misguided expectations. Victoria adjusted her seatbelt with precise movements that made Margaret Whitmore frown. There was something disturbingly familiar about the way her hands found each control without hesitation, as if that cockpit were familiar territory rather than a hostile and unknown environment. This is taking too long.